In the NHL, draft picks get traded at an alarming rate. Just on this past trade deadline day, March 6, 2026, there were a total of 18 draft picks moved. Some of these moves involved teams trading their picks to take big swings for the Stanley Cup now, and other ones involved non-playoff teams acquiring David Kampf. Late-round picks, in particular, seem to be thrown around rather aimlessly. Teams will add late-round picks to larger transactions for literally no reason. They'll trade them for players who haven't even made the NHL, and I think teams would even move them for volcano insurance. I think I'd do basically anything to be a fly on the wall during some of these negotiations between the general managers. The common rationale for these sorts of trades is that late-round picks virtually never amount to anything. And, in the vast majority of cases, this kind of thinking is correct. Look at the 6th round of any draft in NHL history. Most of these names you likely have never even heard of, and it's exceedingly rare to find any NHL players, let alone high-impact ones, at this point in the draft. But, even though it is rare, it is not impossible. Across the entire history of the NHL draft, there have been some cases of these throwaway picks, late-round picks that were added to miscellaneous transactions, turning into stellar NHL players. Today, we're going to talk about 7 of these instances in chronological order. The first one that we're going to look at involves a 1993 7th-round selection. On June 26, 1993, the day of the draft, the Calgary Flames moved their 7th-round pick, 174th overall, to the Washington Capitals in exchange for defenseman Brad Schlegel. Schlegel was a 25-year-old defenseman that had a few NHL games under his belt, but he was clearly trending towards being a depth option rather than an everyday NHL defenseman. Nonetheless, Calgary saw this as a fair gamble, especially for a measly 7th-round pick. But I don't think anyone, including the Washington Capitals themselves, could anticipate how that 7th-round pick was going to turn out. With that 174th overall selection, the Capitals took winger Andrew Brunette from the Owen Sound Platers of the Ontario Hockey League. In the years following the draft, Brunette established himself as a good pick very quickly. In the next season, Brunette was playing at a near point-per-game pace in the American Hockey League. Brunette had multiple productive stints with Washington, but he really found his place as an NHL player following the 1998 expansion draft. After brief periods with Nashville and Atlanta, Brunette's prime came in his years with the Minnesota Wild and the Colorado Avalanche. He had several seasons in the 60 to 80 point range and well exceeded the expectations of a 7th-round pick. Even today, he's still a relevant figure in this league. Brad Schlegel, on the other hand, played in only 26 NHL games with the Calgary Flames. Having said that, Brunette was not the only throwaway pick from the 1993 draft that became a prolific NHLer. On February 26, 1993, around the deadline, the Toronto Maple Leafs acquired tweener defenseman Brad Miller from the Ottawa Senators. In return, they sent the Senators a pick in round 9, a round that doesn't even exist anymore. Brad Miller didn't even play a single game with the Leafs, but it was for a 9th-round pick. It's not like that'll come back to haunt them. This pick ended up being 227th overall, extremely late, and the Senators selected forward Pavol Demitra from Trenchin Dukla of the Czech League. Like Brunette, it became immediately obvious that Demitra was an excellent pick. In the years following the draft, Demitra had some terrific offensive seasons with the PEI Senators of the AHL, and he did have some productive stretches with Ottawa at the NHL level too. Demitra's true breakout took place after he was traded to the St. Louis Blues following a contract dispute. Demitra, often playing with Keith Tkachuk, scored more than 20 goals in each year with the Blues, and he even had a season where he topped 90 points. During the twilight of his career, Demitra played in LA, Minnesota, and Vancouver. He was known as a very skilled forward, and towards the end of his career he was known for his proficiency in the shootout. Demitra tragically passed away in the 2011 Lokomotiv Yaroslavl plane crash, but we shouldn't forget how strong of a player he was. The next pick that we're going to talk about took place during the 1999 NHL draft. On March 23, 1999, a few months before the draft, the Buffalo Sabres sent defenseman Mike Wilson to the Florida Panthers in exchange for Rhett Warrener and a 5th-round draft pick. Wilson and Warrener were both regular NHL players in their early 20s, and they were both defensively oriented defensemen. On paper, it seems really weird that Panthers GM Brian Murray had to add a late-round pick to this deal. And, unexpectedly, that 5th-round pick turned into the most valuable asset in the trade. With that pick, the Sabres selected goaltender Ryan Miller from the North American Hockey League. Much like Demitra and Brunette, Miller's stock exploded following the draft. In the 2000-2001 season, Miller boasted a .950 save percentage with Michigan State University. Then, towards the mid to late 2000s, Miller was an elite goaltender and one of the key cogs of some outstanding Buffalo teams. He also made Team USA in 2010. This little marginal pick added to this deal had enormous benefits for the Sabres, and to add insult to injury, Rhett Warrener had a far longer career than Mike Wilson as well. The next trade that we're going to talk about took place midway through the 2000-2001 season. On December 7, 2000, the Montreal Canadiens acquired Gino Odjick from the Philadelphia Flyers in exchange for TJ Stock and a 2001 sixth-round draft pick. Odjick and Stock had the exact same roles at the time of this trade. They were depth players, known mostly for their fists rather than their puck skills. Odjick was in the late stages of his career, while Stock was a few years younger. Once again, this is a case where it does seem confusing that Montreal had to add a pick to this swap. With that pick at 172nd overall, the Flyers selected defenseman Dennis Seidenberg from the Mannheim Eagles of the German League. Within a couple of years, he was already getting NHL games with the Flyers. Following the 2005 lockout, Seidenberg became a mainstay in this league, and he never looked back. He spent many years in the league as a shutdown defenseman, and he even won the Stanley Cup with the Boston Bruins. The next transaction we're going to look at also involved the Philadelphia Flyers. On March 15, 2002, the Flyers sent winger Francis Lessard to the Atlanta Thrashers in exchange for defenseman David Harlock, a 2003 third-round pick, and a 2003 seventh-round pick. Now, some of our analysis today has clearly been done with the benefit of hindsight. This Lessard trade, however, was questionable from the second it was made. At the time of the trade, Lessard was a 22-year-old enforcer who hadn't even made the NHL, and had only scored 22 points in 142 regular season AHL games. And Atlanta was an absolutely terrible team. They had no reason to be buyers. The fact that Atlanta gave up anything for him is about as baffling as Microsoft Teams' inclusion of the heart emoji. Even though the third-round pick at the time of the transaction was the most valuable pick, the seventh-round pick acquired had the biggest long-term impact. But it wasn't the Flyers who made that pick. In a separate transaction, they sent that pick to the San Jose Sharks, who used that pick to draft Joe Pavelski, 205th overall. Pavelski was playing in the USHL at the time, but following the draft, he ascended to other levels quickly. He was a star at the University of Wisconsin. Then he scored 26 points in his first 16 AHL games. Then he was called up to the Sharks' main roster in 2006. Then he embarked on an 18-year NHL career. He was the captain of a Stanley Cup finalist, he was a two-time Olympian, and he spent the majority of his career scoring between 60 and 80 points. This completely unforced error by Atlanta helped extend San Jose's contention window into the late 2010s. Next up, we're going to look at a move made between the Dallas Stars and the Ottawa Senators. Dallas had acquired a 2010 sixth-round pick from the San Jose Sharks following a trade at the 2009 draft, and they decided to trade this pick in an attempt to improve their goaltending. On July 8, 2009, the Stars sent this sixth-round pick to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for Alex Auld. This seemed like a very reasonable gamble for Dallas at the time. Auld was only 28 years old, and he was coming off a season where he started 43 games and had a save percentage of .911. Goaltenders are a notoriously volatile group of players, but it seemed likely that Auld would at least be a good backup for Dallas. Unfortunately, he was not. He only played 21 games for Dallas before being put on waivers. On the flip side, by the time the 2010 draft took place, Ottawa had the 178th overall pick. They drafted winger Mark Stone from Brandon Wheat Kings of the WHL. Stone, like pretty much everyone else we have discussed today, blew up immediately following the draft. In the 2010-2011 season, Stone tallied 106 points when he had only scored 28 in the season prior. In subsequent years, he became a Calder Trophy finalist, then a mainstay on Ottawa's top line, then a Stanley Cup winning captain. He has had a truly remarkable career, and who knows what would have transpired if Dallas kept that sixth-round draft pick. Up until now, we have talked about 6 different trades, and there is one more I'd like to mention. I will say, though, that out of all of the trades we've looked at so far, this one is the most forgivable, by a landslide. On January 20th, 2012, the New Jersey Devils traded their 4th-round pick to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for winger Alexei Ponikarovsky. New Jersey was gearing up for a playoff run, and they clearly wanted to bolster the depth at the forward position. These sort of trades happen by the dozens every single year. And it's not like the Devils overestimated their potential as a team. After all, they were within 2 games of winning the Stanley Cup. But, amusingly, Carolina came out on top here. By the time the 2012 draft came, that pick was slotted at 120th overall, and the Hurricanes selected defenseman Jacob Slavin from the USHL. Slavin took a little bit longer to make his impact than some of the other players we discussed, but he has spent many years as a top-pairing defenseman, and in 2026 he won an Olympic gold medal, and then won the Stanley Cup with the Carolina Hurricanes. Those were all the examples I wanted to look at today. I liked looking back at all of these instances. I already knew that these players were late-round steals, but I didn't realize the ways in which their teams acquired the picks to draft them in the first place. I think it's really interesting in particular that the last two players that we looked at had just squared off against each other in the Stanley Cup Finals.